All right, we are live here with Elizabeth Lynn Blackson, and we're going to talk about her brand new, as in today, book, Girls Gotta Eat. The only two copies in existence at the
At
moment.
this moment, these are the
Yes,
only two printed copies of this book. That's
yes.
amazing.
Um, but before we get started, I wanted to do a toast because number one, this is your first novel, and it's the first one that I've done that with Tales of Wonder and Dread that is not a book that I've put together. So I wanted to congratulate you on the book.
Thank you.
Cheers!
Cheers, sir.
All right,
Now
so
I'm going to be belching through the whole recording now because I'm drinking beer.
well that will be fine. It'll add some
It's char-
flavor.
it's charming, really.
Yeah,
People
yeah,
watch and go, "She's really someone. She's like someone we could hang out with." Brat, and their hair goes flapping.
exactly. So why don't, speaking of someone you can hang out with, why don't you kind of give the viewers an idea of who you are and how you came to here?
Came to here as an author, or came to here physically, or
Whatever you want to do. It's all
um,
up to you. It's your show.
when I when I was very young, I fell in love with Ray Harryhausen movies, particularly Jason and the Argonauts, and then the Seven Voyages of Sinbad, and stop motion animation, and that led into a love of mythology. Mythology led into comic books and Dungeons and Dragons and Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft, and it all snowballed into this sort of starting to build my own internal mythology. Um, and I think you and I had both spoken about this not long ago, having ideas in like middle school that just won't go away. And here I am at age 50, where seeds were planted when I was 13 or 14, and they just won't go away. They just keep chewing at your brain until you do something with them. Um, so as an author, that's sort of where I am. Dean Koontz, Stephen King, mythology. Um, Dresden Files is something that I've read recently and really loved. And then I got into a phase of reading true crime and um, what else? I'm trying to think of the name of it. The Mind Hunter. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
The origin of the FBI serial killer investigations and the way they built their databases of how to start tracking through forensic information, basically how to catch people, and all of these things sort of added little bits to my personal mythology, and you can see it very clearly in this book. The Mind Hunter particularly comes in very clearly from Agent Torres, FBI, on a case of serial killer, and in the beginning of the book, in the foreword, I mention the the germination, the seed that is the other character, Lucy, started with the lyrics from the song "Knocking at Your Back Door" by Deep Purple. Sweet Lucy was a dancer, and none of us could chance her because she was a samurai. And it's like that stupid little earworm, that little bit of lyric is like, who is that person? Now, if you know what the song's about, it's okay. First of all, we're rated R, like hard R on this interview, right? Because we're discussing a hard R
Yeah,
book.
yeah, I think I don't know how Facebook does that
I'm
since we're
pretty
both
sure.
love it, but
Yeah,
I
I'm
think they'll
pretty sure.
probably be fine with it.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that that song is about anal sex. So, convincing girls into
See, I can never figure out Ian Gillan's lyrics usually. It's like sometimes
uh,
they're like "Smoke on the Water," that's obvious, but
yeah,
some of the
yeah.
other ones, no.
So it's a little like it sounds really. I
You
think
got a,
it's
you got a little comment there.
Einar. This is my friend, one of several early beta readers, and one of the few people who's read the beta version of my entire trilogy so far.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and thanks, Einar. Nice to see you here. Glad you could attend this absurdity. Please feel free to keep commenting. It makes it look like we have a audience and people give a
let,
shit.
let me say, but since as one of the other people who has read your book, uh, 3 times I've been through it,
Wow,
in our whole process. Well, in the whole process of going through proofing with you and everything. So I've read it 3 times and I absolutely love it. And, I'm not just saying that because I published it. I really, really enjoy that book.
I appreciate that.
No, I
And
can't wait to read the other 2.
you say that now. You're going to get about halfway through the second book and be like, I don't know if I'm in for this ride. This is some sketchy shit going on. Literally, I don't know if you've ever done it, but you write something where you're like, da, 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 I'm going to hell.
You know what? I just wrote one. I've got a story that I'm planning for Horrifying Halloween, and it's also going to be in Spooky Berwyn too. And it's got some stuff in there. It's the darkest thing I've ever written,
Yeah.
and it just feels like, okay, need to go take a shower now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly that, where it's like, I don't know what is wrong with me. Come on. And I can read it
I
back
know
now.
exactly what that is.
I can read it back now and I can think, oh, this is dark, but this isn't like intolerably dark. It's just very, very dark. But when I wrote it, I was like, Lynn, you're a monster. What's wrong with you? Okay, so that was the seed of the book.
Right.
I started working, let's see here, how did this go? There's sort of a process as a writer. In two, I started doing sort of fan fiction stuff around 2000. I was journaling at the time. I got tired of listening to my own BS, so I started doing fiction. That led into writing several novellas, and I was starting to get to the point where long form fiction, what's this say?
You and I both got to go up close to read it.
Einar has read 6 of my novels.
Nice.
Some of those will never see the light of day because they were written as speculative pieces for companies that had,
Oh,
trademark stuff.
right,
And
right,
uh, as a matter of fact, I mentioned D&D before. One of them was written for the Eberron setting for Dungeons and
right.
Dragons that was called Vergild, and that was one that Einar read. And I submitted it to Wizards of the Coast and didn't hear a single thing back ever. So I have a novel that's sitting completely finished with nothing to do. And then I wrote a second one for the Pathfinder setting, and I don't remember the name of that world off the top of my head, but that one was called Dregs, and it was much more comedy sort of. It was the concept is the bottom of the barrel heroes. The city is run out of all the good heroes, and it's these
I like
losers.
that.
Yeah, and it's everyone is completely poorly suited for the role that they're put in. Vergild was great. Yeah, you're right. Einar. You should contact them. Get somebody in.
Do they have do they the world and everything is copyrighted to them still, even though Dungeons and Dragons is basically
Yeah,
public domain now?
yeah. But
Yeah.
the system, the game system, the D20 system is public domain, but they have their specific like Greyhawk settings and um, Dragon Riders and
Yeah, yeah.
I can't even remember all the D&D worlds. I think Greyhawk is still the standard one. And then the Golarion, I think it is what it's called for Pathfinder. Then after that, that was 2003, 4, something like that. I got a job interning building 3D models for a game company that was going to do a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. And I built some assets for them. I taught myself how to use 3ds Max, and meanwhile, I was playing the Serenity role-playing game based on the series Firefly and the movie Serenity, and started as a fan just creating output for it. And that ended up with me doing this. Get this in the right place here. Um, this was one of the supplements for the role-playing game.
Oh,
And
nice.
inside that, the second half of the book is like there's a bunch of starship stuff,
Oh, cool.
the
I didn't know
renderings
you
of
did
the
that. That's
starships.
awesome.
Yeah, and then the crew write-ups and things like that. And yeah, I built like, I don't remember, 30 models for this book and
Nice.
rendered out the pictures and built a bunch of rule systems for it. There's a good spread of the multiple ships. Those are all the models that I built for this book. And I thought that was going to lead to something huge, and I was going to be, I was doing 3D art for a living, and nothing came of it. I got some other work through Margaret Weis Productions, the people who produced the Serenity role-playing game. Einar was in my game group, played one of the characters who got printed up in this book.
Oh, nice.
Then we went to Gen Con, and he played a Serenity role-playing game session and got to say, like, hey, let me see that book. Yeah, see that character there? That one there? That's me. See here on the inside cover, that all the thanks to? Yeah, that's me.
Nice.
Yeah. It's like super geek cred. Nobody else cares. But when you go to Gen Con and sit at a gaming table where they're using the rule book that you're in, you're like,
I can remember going to a bunch of gaming conventions when the Star Trek Starship Combat Simulator was a big thing, and the whole FASA Star Trek stuff was there.
mm-hmm.
And I would be playing with Forrest Brown, who was the guy who wrote those books, and you'd be playing with a bunch of the artists who did the artwork in it and stuff.
Yeah.
It was kind of, I don't know, surreal to be playing with the very guys who did the book and did the game,
Yeah, and when you do it for a small company, you have to do it because you love it, and so, yeah, you go to a session and it's like, oh, yeah, that's the guy that did such and such rule system or created this artwork for the thing, and it's amazing. I was I'm going to bounce all over with topics if that's okay.
It's fine.
I
We're
was
gonna have fun.
I was
It's a
doing some artwork.
special
Sorry.
day. We're gonna have fun.
Oh, okay. I was doing some deck plans, the same sort of deck plan style that I did for this. I was doing just as a fan. I was making some stuff for the Wizards of the Coast Saga Edition role-playing game. I was just doing deck plans for some of the existing ships in the universe. The Rebel transport that you see flying off of Hoth in Empire Strikes Back. I built a deck plan for that so people could use it as a resource in their role-playing game. And there's a Star Wars Artist Guild, SWAG, is a place where people contribute. And there was a guy that was doing this really nice, like pen marker artwork of characters and stuff. There's a thing where people can do characters and they have character. You know what I mean? They're
Mhm.
doing things. They have, a wrench hanging off their belt that sort of tells a story. And just everything about them, you look at them and they go, that character has a history. This guy was doing that artwork and it was beautiful, and I sent him a message, said, your stuff is great, you should work as an artist for a living. Turns out his name was Daniel Falconer, and he works for Weta and did all the elf artwork for Lord of the Rings. So he's safe in his he's gainfully employed as an artist, so I need to just shut my mouth.
So it's funny. The funny, you and I both share the whole gaming history too, and it's funny because some of the stuff you just run into people. Like I remember one of my most famous ones for me. Was when I was at a gaming convention, and I knew there was a D&D game going on over there earlier in the day, but my friends and I always played D&D anyway, so it was like we can play D&D at home. Let's play something we don't normally get to play, and so we played some other things. Well, my friends were off doing a game, and I see this guy over by where they were running the D&D games, and I just start chatting with him. And it turns out his name was Gary as well, and we're just standing there chatting about the day and everything, and what games have been going on, and various stuff for probably half an hour. And then my friends walk up, and we're going to leave. And as I tell them goodbye, we walk away, and my friends look at me. Who you were just talking to? No, Gary Gygax. I'm like, that's Gary Gygax.
Yeah,
that's
Gary.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I've got a friend of mine, actually, the person to whom I dedicated this book, and one of her favorite tales is how she played in a game mastered by Gary Gygax at an early Gen Con. So yeah, it's the sort of legendary status of that.
yeah.
Which kind of brings me back to the book when I was talking about the history of how I got to my book.
Right.
So I did the work for this company that did this role-playing game that's called Margaret Weis Productions. Margaret Weis is a fairly famous author in Dungeons and Dragons world.
Right. I've seen her stuff before.
Right. And she is friends with a man named Ed Greenwood. And Ed Greenwood started a publication group and was trying to get authors that he thought were up-and-coming fiction authors, get them a chance to get out in the spotlight and have their stuff seen. This was 2017, and I had sent him a work I had co-written with a friend of mine, and he said he loved it and he would love for us to add to his. At the time, the series was called Hellmaw, and it was about demons on Earth, shape-shifting, soul-sucking demons on Earth. And so I wrote this book uh, on spec for his company, and it was supposed to be, I think it was 14th in line for publication. And I don't remember, I think it went 7 books or something, and then the project fell apart. And there I was, because of my connection with playing D&D, doing work with Margaret Weiss Productions, meeting Ed Greenwood, producing this manuscript. Mine was Hellmaw, A Girl's Gotta Eat. I had a complete manuscript, and I sat on it, and it ate at me. I couldn't let go of the characters. I couldn't let go of the concept, and I couldn't let it just rot. I really honestly felt that it was the point. After you write, you know, it was my 5th, I think, full novel that I'd written, and they vary in quality, but you tend, if you keep writing and you keep working on your craft, they tend to get better. So I thought I was at a point where it's like, no, this is a worthy piece of work. It's not garbage. And I really wanted it to see the light of day. And I'll be honest, I want people to come up to me and go, "You're amazing." So, a little bit of an ego thing there. So I had this manuscript, and a friend of mine said, "You're going to have a lot better chance selling it, getting it published if you have 3 books completed, because publishers just don't even care about individual novels anymore." I don't know the truth of that, but that's what I was told. So I pushed through 3 novels in the series. So there are, at this moment, 3 manuscripts. This one is coming out today. We've got the schedule for the next 2. And you know how this goes. If it goes well, I guess I keep working on it. And if not, then I got my 3, and I got to tell the story to a point where I feel like it has a fairly natural end to it. That's it. Have I rambled enough?
That was good.
I'm terrified.
You're fine. You're doing great. Drink up.
I'll work on this. I'll be much funnier as I keep drinking. At least I'll think I'm much funnier.
Well, there you go.
What else matters, really?
So,
how did you get into this? How did you get into wanting to publish your own work and work as a publisher and author? And
okay, well, it started out. I started doing Music Street Journal in '98, and because I had some friends who did similar things, and I thought, that I can do that too.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of got me some respect as far as the writing goes.
Could I pause you for a minute? Explain what Music Street Journal is for the...
Yeah, it's music reviews and interviews, and the main emphasis is progressive rock, but it's also heavy metal and just about anything. So, and it started out, funny thing enough, it started out as a Microsoft Word document emailed to a bunch of people who wanted it, which was about 25 people. And after about 2 or 3 issues, somebody convinced me to put it out on the web, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, I remember I haven't gotten good statistics for it for years now, because when we changed over to a different thing, the statistics started acting funny, so I don't even pay attention to them anymore. But at one point in the early 2000s, we were running about 1.2 million visitors, unique visitors a month, which was pretty insane.
That's a pretty huge viewership, yeah.
Yeah, and so then I had decided, you know what, I should try to do a book. And I thought, well, it should be something I know. And the first thing I thought of was Yes, the band, because I'm a Yes fanatic. And I thought, you know what, there are already several books out there. I don't see how I can do anything different than that. So then I thought, well, I love music, and I love H.P. Lovecraft, and I noticed there are a lot of Lovecraft books out, or Lovecraft music out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to do a book about all the music that's inspired by Lovecraft. And I started pitching it to literary publishers, They said there was too much music content in it. I started pitching it to book publishers. They said it was too literary. So,
Yeah.
and I had all these people who I'd interviewed who were very interested in seeing it. And I thought, well, I could just toss it and be done with it. And I thought, no, you know what? I'm going to look into self publishing. So I did. And then after that, I wound up doing another one, which was another book of interviews with musicians. And then I started noticing all these writer friends that I had. And I thought, well, what if we all get together and put some stories together? I could put a compilation out. So I did Dark Dreams and Weird Worlds,
Mm-hmm.
which basically was what Tales of Wonder and Dread was, but it was before I came up with the idea of doing Tales of Wonder and Dread. And I had so much fun doing that, and it got, people liked it. So I thought, well, why don't I try to do a publishing imprint devoted to science fiction, horror, and just generally spooky stuff? And that became Tales of Wonder and Dread.
Cool.
Yeah.
I might have something related to that. Does this look familiar to you, sir?
Oh, yes. Yes. There are two of the Tales of Wonder and Dread collections.
So yes, you've told some spooky tales, and I've had the good fortune to help you out with these couple short stories, or a short story in each of these of
Yep.
mine. How do you like anthologies versus full-length fiction? I'm interviewing you now, I
Yeah,
guess.
I know. This is kind of weird.
How do you like the short fiction versus the long fiction stuff?
For writing or for reading?
Pick.
I like reading short stories probably better just because they take a lot less time,
Yeah.
and it's good for if you're in a hurry, you can knock out reading a short story really quickly.
I always think of that as airport reading for some reason. The thing that comes to my mind is I'm stuck in an airport for 2 hours, and then I'm stuck on a plane for an hour, and then,
Yeah. And I love the collections because you can just go through, okay, this looks interesting, and read that, and you're done for that session of reading.
And if you don't like it, you just skip
Move on to something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as writing, I am a very minimalist writer. I tend to think that unless it literally directly serves the story, it shouldn't be in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know I read a lot of writers who write something and they've got to pull so much out because it's too long. I never have that problem. I have the opposite problem. I get done and I go, well, what can I flesh out a little more? This character needs a little more characterization. Let's put in a scene to give a little more to that character. So I've never written a novel length thing. I mean, Wizard Song is sort of novel length, but it's novel length in the old school novels when the turn of the 20th century, you'd get things were a lot shorter than what we consider novels now.
Yeah, 50,000, is that what it is? Something
I
like
don't even think it's that. It's probably about 40. I think
40,000.
35 to 40,000.
Like it would be classified as a novella these days.
Right.
Probably longer than Carrie by Stephen King, though. That's a really short read.
Yeah, I think so. And it was like, I remember looking up, there were a lot, it's longer than Wizard of Oz. It's longer than a lot of things, but it's still considered today, it isn't really considered a novel, but I sort of do because it just seems odd to me that they sort of changed the definition in the last 100 years. But other than that, and The Homestead's definitely a novella, and so is the one I'm getting ready to publish on September 4th, which is part of that project that you're in, which is kind of a fun story variant project.
Right.
So, I don't think I write that way. I don't know. I'm trying to read what your friend said. Several new authors through anthology books. Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. Speaking of which, weirdly enough, George R.R. Martin was an author that I found because of the Wild Card series. I don't know if you've ever read that. It's really weird superhero stuff. There's in the world of the wild cards, there are two sort of power levels. There are aces and jokers. The aces are like Superman, where you get flight and laser vision, and the jokers are just complete monstrosities. It just wrecks your life. Syl,
I love it.
who you're seeing here that says Laura Hewitt is my friend Syl.
Oh, okay.
Yes, woohoo!
Well, this is fun. We've not done one with people commenting before. This is
Yeah,
a
this
lot of
is
fun.
great. It's awesome to have. Hi, everybody.
Feedback.
My friends are listening to me. I'm so important. Okay, so where were we?
I don't know. We got lost here, but
Exactly. The best
you
place
were
to
talking
be.
about George R. R. Martin.
George R. R. Martin, I discovered through Wildcards, and apparently that series of books was based on the role-playing game that he and his friends were all in, a superhero role-playing game. I don't remember the system, but I seem to recall that it actually was like, oh, I have fans! Cheers. If you all listening have a question for me, please feel free to ask. I'm
Yep.
running out of material.
Well, I was going to say, we haven't actually talked about what the book is about, which, without, obviously, we're not going to give too much away, but kind of,
Right.
why don't you sort of talk a little bit about what the book is about? It's a little hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to describe it without giving it away.
No.
But I'll start with this. Skull, baby! A couple years ago, I was reading a book that was about the Degas sculpture of the Little Dancer of 14 Years. And there's a copy. I didn't know that there were copies of it. I thought it was a single sculpture, but there are 30, apparently something like 30 copies of it spread throughout the world. There's one in the Louvre. There's one in St. Louis, where I live. By the way, that's something I should mention. The book takes place in St. Louis. I know that when I write a setting in this book where I describe it, there's a point where they go into a coffee shop and I describe the coffee shop. I've been in that coffee shop. There are places in this book I haven't been. I've never been inside the FBI headquarters. There's some sketchy places mentioned in the book that I haven't gone into. I don't break into abandoned warehouses, which I mentioned at one point. So,
Or old churches that are falling apart.
old churches that are falling apart. Yeah. So there's a copy of Little Dancer of 14 Years by Degas in the St. Louis Art Museum. Fencing, fighting, torture, revenge, escapes. That's just
Monsters.
monsters. What's the line?
That's pretty good way.
What's the line from the grandpa from Princess Bride? Torture, escape, true love. So the sculpture. It's a 14-year-old dancer, and she's standing and she's got her head tipped up and she looks kind of snotty, like defiant, I guess is the word. And I love the sculpture. It's done in a style that's beautiful. And I don't know how much you know about the artist Degas and his work.
I know very little about art. I know
Okay.
what I like, and that's about it. The
He,
typical non-artist person.
he has extensively painted ballerinas. Just he has lots of pieces of ballerinas. And in high school, my art teacher was going through art history, and I brought up like it feels like he's a dirty old man. He's painting all these young girls doing ballet, but then you start looking at what he's actually painting, and he tended to paint two different things of ballet dancers. He painted them either in pain, like slumped and holding their sore feet, or just looking miserable after having worked hard for trying to learn their skill, or on stage, and the focus of the painting wasn't the dancers, but it was the dirty old men in top hats looking they were the patrons that were looking from behind the curtain backstage and making deals with the mothers to prostitute their daughters.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So it's that thing where you think of every young girl wants to be a ballet dancer. They want to have a pony and they want to be a ballet dancer. And there's this romance to it. Einar's commenting still.
Yeah, everybody's commenting still.
So that was a thought that I kept having was these the thing that we see now as this beautiful, prestigious art form, at one point, you know how actors are, they're considered okay now, but at one point it was like the low life. If you were an actor, you were one step up from being street vermin.
Hmm.
Ballet dancers used to be the same thing. They used to call the girls that were coming up through the ranks to learn ballet street rats.
Oh,
The the Little Mermaid thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I figured.
We just got a comment. I don't know if you all see the comments popping up, but
I pop them up
okay.
so everyone should see them? Yes.
And that was something that ate at me, was the difference between the way we see ballet now is this beautiful uh, high art, and how it used to be considered just short of, and not even just short of prostitution, but equivalent and sometimes the same thing, because the mothers were selling off dates. So the main character, one of the two in the book, is a girl named Lucy. She's 25 and she works as an exotic dancer and feels like she missed her calling to be a ballet dancer, and feels like she's doing the grossest, lowest form of what she ought to do. So it's trying to find self-worth when the world looks at you as, vermin. So, and the title of the book is obviously the joke of prostitution, saying, well, a girl's got to eat. Um, it's doubly,
Yeah, it has a different meaning.
because the first is that from Lucy's perspective, what she had to do just to survive, and the other is that there's literally a flesh-eating succubus that shows up in the book, because the other character, the two main characters are Lucy, this girl struggling to be something more than a low-life streetwalker, and uh, an FBI agent named Javier Torres, who is investigating a serial killing spree that turns out being this succubus, and how these two characters collide with that succubus in the middle, sort of between the two of them. So,
Yeah, I think one of the things I think is interesting, and I don't know, it's interesting when you write something. Sometimes there are themes that emerge that you intended, and then other times there are themes that emerge that you didn't even think about. It just sort of happens. And
mhm.
I don't know. I think you intended this one, but it seems to me that there's a lot of theme of beauty, but also beauty and desirability, but having a dark side and an ugliness and
Oh yeah,
a devouring power to it.
yes.
That's very much a theme that's throughout there.
Oh, and that theme becomes much more pronounced. Not so much in the second book, but in the third book, it is very much out there in the open. There's another thing where I think I want to read just the last sentence of the first paragraph of the book.
Okay.
On stage, though, she was treated like a goddess. There's a thing where there's a whole undercurrent story of the worship of female beauty, but in a sense that it must be possessed.
Right.
There's a line in there where Lucy looks at this succubus who is physically essentially perfect. She is flawless. She has not a wrinkle, not a blemish. She's flawlessly beautiful. And Lucy looks at her with pity and thinks something like, everybody wants you, but it's just because everybody wants to fuck you. And it's like, oh, you're only wanted because they think that exterior beauty is, the thing that they want. And then you find out that Vespid is using that. That's a hook. It's a lure. It's not real. It's a, you know,
Bait.
yeah, bait. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I would say that I know there's it's such a hard book to define as far as genre. There are definitely horror elements, a lot of horror elements. It's very spooky in a lot of ways, but it's also an action adventure. X-Files sort of action adventure, and
Yeah, and I reference X-Files directly in at one point in
yeah,
it. In
yeah,
she's reading fan wikis about FBI agents and monster hunters, and I'm like, I'm just gonna put a lampshade right on that shit.
yeah, might as well.
Well,
That's
yeah, it's
always
like
fun to do. I love. I don't know if anyone will catch it, but I love. You've got one for Office Space.
the
You
red
got one,
state.
yeah, which I absolutely love. The red stapler.
Yeah, there's another line that's kind of similar to the one boss where he says, that would be great or whatever.
Oh,
In
I missed that.
Yeah, there's a part where Torres says something like, "Yeah, if you could just go ahead and turn into a unearthly killing machine so I could see it, that would be great."
Oh, I remember that now. But it's also huh,
Um, s- I tried to explain it as if the Dresden Files were written by Stephen King, and somebody responded with, "It's more like if the Dresden Files had been written by Clive Barker."
nice.
So if you want to know what book this hangs out with, that would be the closest equivalent. Is it's Dresden Files gone many shades darker.
Yeah, it is. It is a very dark book, but it's also. I mean, it doesn't leave you with a horrible feeling. It leaves you with sort of hope in a way.
That was a hard thing because is not supposed to be this is supposed to be kind of Greek in its level of tragedy. Like you don't come out of here as the winning perfect hero. You survive.
No, it's there's almost there's almost like Batman, Batman movies, the trilogy,
Yeah, yeah,
the Dark Knight. It's or no, the first, the third one. I mean, it's like yes, you come out of it, the hero wins, but at what cost and what's
yeah.
been destroyed? And
Oh yeah, yeah.
even look at the first Avengers movie. Look at how much devastation there is. Yeah,
Yeah,
they won, but
right.
and it's that sort of thing. It's like it was. There's so much devastation.
In the second book, what doesn't kill you keeps you in traction for 6 months. Um, Still, yes, there is a lot of one of the reasons it's hard to place this book as far as genre is it's too gay for mainstream and not gay enough for gay publishing.
Yeah,
Um, there's a
sort of
there
like my too literary for
Right, exactly
so,
that.
yeah,
It's too procedural to be a fantasy. It's not procedural enough to be, this. It's too much of a this to be that, not enough. And well, what is it? Well, it's a chimera. It's what happens when a thylacine and a spider become a hybrid.
yeah, and you actually explain this stuff enough that it has a science fiction edge versus more of a magic sort of,
Right.
which is I think is cool because it makes it more believable, makes it a more procedural type thing, and that makes it something where you can feel drawn into that world a little more.
hmm there is a real hard sciency edge to the character Javier Torres. He thinks of the world in neat little boxes of science. At one point, he says something about he tried to turn the horror into science. He's talking about a dead body he found and putrescine and cadaverine and trying not to get sick while looking at a body that's been mutilated. And yeah, and then him trying to come up to speed with looking right at something that he knows is physically impossible. He's looking right at it happen to him, and he's
Yeah,
this my this is wrong to everything I know. So what I know must be wrong, and I have to relearn. Yeah,
yeah,
that was all the procedural stuff and all the science stuff that I read for FBI and forensics and all that stuff back when I was reading Tom Harris and Red Dragon and Mindhunter and serial killer stuff and all the serial killer websites that I perused. Came in great like this book was basically, I don't have to do much research. I know this stuff. I'm weird enough to.
I like the ones you don't have to do a lot of research because it's already in there.
There was still, it's weird where
Yeah.
you think you know, like, oh, I know this really well. I'm just going to write a scene about a stripper. I don't know jack shit about the life of a stripper. So you spend 2 days scouring the internet trying to find. And then the other day, like literally 2 days ago, uh, I a girl I know who is an exotic dancer. I'm like, can you read this and let me know how bad I messed it up? She's like, no, you got that pretty solid. And I'm like, oh, thank God. No, I'm an author. I know literally everything.
Well, one of the things I think about, trying to get into like the life and stuff of people who are very different than yourself is, and I think you and I both have an edge on that because of role playing games, because that's literally what you're trying to do in those. And so once you can get your head inside someone who's very different from you start to learn to be able to do that. You're not going to be 100%, but you can get pretty close, I think. It's easy to. I think role playing games make it so you can get outside of yourself and understand what somebody else's experience might be. I mean, you're not obviously going to live it, but you can sort of understand what they're going through to some degree, and that helps with writing characters that are very different than you.
Yeah. And it's a thing where you start to understand that even your honest self, who you are living from one day to another, you could learn something, be exposed to something, and change your perspective so vastly that in the course of 3 years, your mindset could shift radically.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's a point where that happens a couple times, and you start going, I better not pin my entire sense of self on any single core belief that may shift, like sand in the tide. And then you feel like you've burned bridges and isolated people and created hatred. And then you try to apologize and make up for your stupidity and hope you didn't wreck your relationships with people that you loved. Not that that's ever happened to me, of course. That's hypothetical. This is all.
Well, and I think without getting too deeply into current events, I think
Oh boy, we better not go there.
I think one of the big problems in our world today has probably always been people like you and I think, have gone through things where you do literally have to tear apart the foundation of what you're built on and rebuild it because you've learned some new information that changes everything that's at the core of who you are. And I think people who have never been through that, it is not a pleasant experience, not by any means,
No,
but it makes you a better person on the other side. But people who have never been through that, a lot of times are terrified of it,
it's
and
terrifying.
with they will stick with the lies and the things that are obviously just proven because they don't have to do that work.
It's so much work to like take everything you know and everything you believe, pull it all out of the neat little boxes you've put it in your whole life. Those sort of cosmic scales of how you weigh right and wrong.
Right.
Trying to take that whole system apart is a lot of processing. I mean, it's a lot of thought and a lot of, like you said, kind of self-reflection and honesty at a level that is hard to get to sometimes
Yeah,
without
and it's
challenging yourself.
painful, it's frightening,
Yeah,
and I think, I get that people don't want to do it, but unfortunately, if you're, dealing with things that are completely false, you're going to have bad outcomes.
yeah,
And I think and then the thing is that when people like that are confronted with things that create cognitive dissonance, they get angry and they
yeah,
feel like it's attacking their identity,
yeah, yeah.
and that they get fearful, they get angry, and they lash out, and that's what we see a lot. And like I say, it's probably always been that way, but I think we really see it a lot, probably because of social media more than anything else, because people who are very different can connect in ways that they didn't used to. It used to be you just connect with people who were in your family and who lived near you. And now with social media, we're contacting people who are all over the world and very different from ourselves.
I don't know if it's that or the exact opposite, where because we can connect with millions of people, we can find hundreds.
Reinforcement.
Yeah, we find hundreds of people who believe what we believe, no matter how.
Well, I think it's a little. I think it's a little bit of both because you feel a little stronger in those beliefs because you find others who agree with them,
Right.
but then you get more chances for them to be confronted because you've got the others outside.
No, you just block the people on
Well,
social
that's
media
true
that are.
too. You do that a lot.
I do it. I mean, I understand I live in a sort of bubble where, um, I'm not going to listen to these people. They get no brain time with me if they say certain things. It's like, look, I've had this argument 5 million times, and I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to waste my life. I'm not going to stress myself out trying to convince people of something that they're never going to change their opinion. And it's like, I'm not going to school you. It's not my job anymore.
Yeah, I do that too. I will say, when it comes to like social media and blocking, I almost never ever block anyone. And when I do, I unblock them usually a few weeks later. And generally, the only times I've done that, one guy friended me and immediately sent me pictures of his junk and direct messages, and I'm like, okay, I don't really want this. And there
He
was
said
another
he
person.
said you like, was there anything that you said or did that
No,
made him think
nothing. It
like,
was like as soon as I approved his friend request, boom, there it is.
"Dear sir, you look like the sort of
No,
fellow
there
who would
was
like to
nothing,
see
just
my
pictures.
cock."
Just the pictures.
Well, okay, well, was yep, yep. Einar uh argues on the internet for entertainment value. Don't
I
lie about it
sometimes do
either.
that. I sometimes do that, but I also get bored with it after a while, and I'm like, I'm not spending any more time on this with you.
Have you
It's
seen the thing
pointless.
that's like, I can't come to bed right now, there's somebody
Oh,
wrong on the internet?
somebody wrong on the internet. Yeah,
That's Einar. I'm calling you out, man. I'm calling you out. You know I'm right.
but yeah, I mean, I never block anybody, and then I unblock them. I literally, my block list on Facebook right now is one person, and the only reason there's that person on there is because they were a spammer, and
Uh,
somebody obviously reported them, and their account has been deleted, so I can't remove it from the block list.
oh, I have I have two accounts. If people are watching this video, Einar owns up to it.
Yeah,
I have two accounts on Facebook. One is my public author account that is Elizabeth Blackson. It's me looking all sinister with a skull behind me.
that's a cool picture.
The other one is Elizabeth Lynn Blackson. That's my personal Facebook account, and it is not open to the public because I say shit on that account that I do not want public. um, but if anyone sees this video and cares, they can follow or send a friend request to the Elizabeth Blackson on Facebook, and I am happy to share my stuff with them. From the skull collection, says Einar. My husband has a skull collection, um, and unfortunately, none of them are real.
My wife certainly would have a skull collection, and she may one day. She loves stuff with skulls on it. So
We have in our dining room, we have like 6 plastic Halloween skulls. We have a skull that's made for like medical students. Like the skull top comes off with the little latches that hold it
oh,
together,
nice.
and the spring holding the jaw in place. It's fairly anatomically correct. We have a couple other like ceramic skull things. We have a couple gargoyles. We have a anatomical cutaway poster. This is our dining room, and the thing is that my hubby got all that stuff, not me. I mean, I'm writing horror, but he's like, "Yeah, go ahead, be gross. It's awesome."
I was going to look. I've got behind me. I've got two skulls, and I think there's some kind of a gargoyle or something back there too. It looks like a tombstone.
I don't see it.
Oh, you probably can't because of the position of the
Is it this
camera.
way?
I've got I've got this one,
There you go.
uh, and this smaller one. They're both candle holders. But
I could tell you a really cool story about my anatomy textbook.
okay, and then I've got this guy behind me,
Nice.
and then this nice little tombstone thing. I've got a couple tombstones actually back here, but
Awesome. As long as they don't say RIP on them.
oh, this one actually does.
Oh,
Let me see if this one does. This one, oh, this one does too. They're all candle holders, though, except for that one statue. So let's hear about your story about the anatomy class.
An anatomy book.
Or anatomy book.
Yeah. So this is my anatomy book. I mean, it is a full-on doctor's anatomy book. Like, this thing's amazing. I got that book from my.
Oh,
Thank you for ruining my story, Einar.
I was,
That's the book I'm
I
showing.
was, I was sitting back there, so yeah, I didn't see that.
My brother worked at a university at one point and went to their book sale, and he found this book for sale. It's $4. This is a teacher's edition of an anatomy textbook.
Nice.
This thing is, I think it's $300 new. It smells like formaldehyde because it got zipped up overnight with a cadaver. Exactly. See, that's how you get good horror stories, is you collect things that are neat and anatomical and vaguely gross. We both have the same memory triggers. This is all true. Einar has been a friend of mine for 17 years, something like that. And Syl, who keeps showing up as Laura, has been a friend of mine for about a year, I think.
Nice.
Don't know them as well as I wish I could because of COVID, and I have fairly severe social anxiety stuff. So when I get in crowds of people, it makes me crazy.
Yeah, I am the same way, and since COVID, it's much worse.
Laura says since Chieftains, yeah, that was 2 years ago. But like there was Chieftains, and then everything shut down, and then Crown. Yes, Crown was, yeah. We Laura there Hewitt, who I know as Syl because of the SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism. I dress up like a Viking lady and go watch a bunch of people put on armor and beat the hell out of each other. So,
Doesn't everyone?
but we worked together in the kitchens, and because everybody pitches in at these things. Oh, okay. Wasn't it that Chieftains? It was the other Chieftains. Yes. It was Crown, though, that we worked in the kitchens together. So, yeah, we have an audience of 2. Come on, this is crazy. I've never had an audience of any, so this is way larger than I've ever had.
Well, and what'll happen, what typically happens with these, I've noticed, is, they stay out there on Facebook, and there's enough spooky content here. This can go on the Spooky Ventures YouTube channel too, which they don't pick up as many views there as they do on Facebook. But it's funny. Usually, in about a week after they actually are live, I go look, and there's been like 100, 125. I think the one I did with you before has more views than any other one that we've done. I think it has like 188 views or something.
That's weird.
Yeah, I think that's the number one most viewed. But I've noticed they're getting a lot more views lately than they used to, which is good.
Syl says, I call myself L, but everyone... Elizabeth Lynn. For anyone who knows me personally, I go by my middle name, Lynn. And in the SCA, my name is Lynn. So I didn't want to confuse people by having multiple names. I go by Lynn. 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 Where were we? Let's talk about the book some more.
Okay.
It has gore. It has science in forensic information. There's a thing in the book where Torres talks about doing geographical profiling, where based on crimes or locations of bodies or whatever, you can mathematically calculate a reasonable area where something in someone's life is bringing them, so that you know that we keep getting notifications. So
yeah,
not that there's anything wrong with multiple names now, but There was a case in Canada where there was, I think he was a colonel in the Air Force, the Canadian Air Force, and he was a serial killer, and they caught him by geographical profiling. And I found that so absolutely fascinating that I decided to put it in my book as a little nod to that case. Um, the character Torres, before working in the FBI, was enlisted in the Air Force, and when I made these characters in my book, it's like I took a little tiny chisel and a hammer and split myself into a bunch of little pieces, and I assigned this bit of my life to this character and this bit of my life to that character, and my enlistment in the Air Force went to Torres.
Oh,
And
you were in the Air Force?
I spent 6 years enlisted in the Air Force, the
You know
entire
that?
time on Scott Air Force Base as a computer programmer, which is how I ended up in St. Louis.
Oh, which there's a lot of that in Torres then.
Yeah, yeah. His was I changed it slightly. He was on Wright Patterson instead of Scott. But
Right.
at one point, he's talking to another character, and he said, "I spent my time in the Air Force, never even got on a Air Force aircraft the whole time CONUS, and that was 100% my career." Veteran of a foreign war.
I love the one before that though.
I didn't see the one before it.
It's right there. I just put it up.
So who directs the screen adaptation? Ridley Scott. Uh, if the Wachowski siblings wanted to direct it, I would be completely cool with that.
I would say this would make a great book.
What was it called?
Be a great movie. I mean, sorry.
The Wachowski Starship? Is that what they call each other?
Veteran of the Psychic Wars.
Veteran of a what's the line? Veteran of
Veteran of 1,000 Psychic Wars.
yeah.
Yes, Bluister Cult Fanatic.
So yeah, I was in the Air Force, and that's how I got into the St. Louis area. I got stationed on Scott. I spent 6 years. I was a computer programmer. 6 years because I enlisted with a job reservation that required a 6-year enlistment. That the job reservation then got pulled, and I ended up doing something different. I was going to be a linguist. I ended up being a programmer. Um,
I've heard so many stories about people having that happen.
well, stuff happens. The needs of the Air Force come first. That sort
Right.
of thing. But it turns out I love St. Louis. It's not like a big city. It's like 100 little cities that are real close to each other. 6 years before the keyboard. Yar. I told someone once I went home from tech school, and I was talking with them. I said I joined the Air Force. And they said, "What do you fly?" And I said a Z-248. And they said, "I've never heard of it." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's a stealth program. We're not allowed to talk about it." The Z-248 was a 286 processor computer,
That's awesome.
but doing it with a straight face. Z
I had a friend. I had a friend years ago who was well. When people asked him what he did, he said he was a professional killer. He worked for Orkin.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, he
I
didn't lie.
I had a job when I was still in the Air Force. I worked for a company that made yearbooks. They printed yearbooks, and I am not even kidding. There's a job where you have the page from all the photos, the negatives, and all those lines between all the photos have to be perfectly crisp and clear. You take this amber tape and you'd lay it on the negatives in straight lines. So you put these strips of tape on the thing to make nice clean borders. Putting those strips of tape on the negatives was called stripper. You were a stripper. And then and I'm not making this up, you would take those pages and you would hook them together and hang them up on this. And those people were called hookers. So I was a stripper working with a bunch of hookers. So
That's funny. That's funny.
that's the joy of my life. It's just absurd. Um, Einar mentioned that I was a veteran of a foreign war. I literally am the Iraqi war, the one that lasted, what was it, 46 days or something
Desert
like that?
Storm.
Yeah, Desert Storm. I enlisted. I was in basic training. The war started and ended before I finished basic training.
Oh wow.
My service during the time of a foreign war was I was learning how to march and shine boots. it was
Valuable
weird.
skill you use to this day.
Yeah, well, no, don't use either of them. There's another thing that Torres inherited from me where it says something about he never got that spit and polish look that other agents had. I was a slob. I was not.
God, I could imagine myself. I'm terrible at that kind of stuff.
I learned how to do all of it, and then immediately after basic training, it's like just fell right out of my head. But how often if you don't use marching or everybody was getting the fake called like Corafram or Coraflam or something boots that looked really shiny, so you never had to shine them anymore.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so nobody was actually shining them. There were still a few diehard old folks, but I never did. And mostly we went for a long time where we were wearing blues, and then everybody kind of got con- convinced the commander
Patent leather.
patent leather, but there's a name for it specifically, like Corafram. I would type it in, but I don't care. And then they went to jungle jump boot things, the ones with the Gore-Tex panels on the side, and the black ones were out.
Oh, wow.
I was one of the last people that was issued a olive drab field jacket, like immediately after it went to BDU camouflage, and I got like one of the last late surplus jackets. So
Oh, wow.
there you go, chlorofram, corpse frams, yes, fram alarms, chloroframs. Wait, I don't,
So now I've learned more about military stuff that I didn't know.
yeah, it's funny because I write some stuff about. In the first book, there's a character that was in the army. In the second book, I introduce a character that's a Marine, and I don't know anything about the army or the Marines. I have to like research. Please, God, don't let me get this wrong. Weren't you in the military? Well, no, I was in the Air Force. It's different. It's not really the military. Yeah,
I think every branch is probably a lot different than the others, but
yeah, but the Air Force is just every other every other branch hated the Air Force because it's like, oh man, I think I pulled a nail. And you listen to guys in the Army or the Marines where it's like, I just carried 100 pounds of crap for 30 miles today and then slept in a mud puddle. And it's like, seems to me like you chose the wrong branch. I mean,
it's like Captain America. If you get killed, walk it off.
shake that shit off, brother. Yeah. Yeah, I was not like hoorah military. I was like, I'm gonna type and then I'm gonna sit here and wait for the compiler and sip my coffee. Let me show you. I have owned this mug since my Air Force days, since my very earliest Air Force days. I got
Wow.
stationed on Scott Air Force Base. This is one of the original ones, folks. It's the
Wow.
Farside Latte Jed mug from the first release when there were only 3 Farside mugs.
Wow.
And it's still like in good condition. Yeah, there's a joke that I tell. Einar's talking about it. In the military, when each branch is given the order to secure the building, it means different things. When you tell the Marines to secure the building, they set up a perimeter, sandbags, machine gun nests, walk the perimeter, floodlights. You tell the Army to secure a building, they put 2 men to walk around the perimeter every half hour. You tell the Navy to secure the building, they lock the door when they leave. You tell the Air Force to secure a building and they get a 5-year lease. Corfram, yes, thank you. Thank you for that research. You'll get no prize or a handshake or autographed copy of a
You
piece
get
of
a
paper. You get an applause from us. Thank you, Sil. Um, so where are we now?
oh, I don't know. I got lost.
So did I. It's a great time. I really ought to just drink more when I do interviews.
Here you go.
It feels so much easier. Um, let's see. The So the book, right? It's the two characters, essentially Lucy and Torres. There are a couple other. Einar is going to get an autographed first edition because, like I said, he was one of my earliest beta readers. So,
Nice.
dude, seriously, dude, I might give you the pen whipped, like one of the first two that come off the assembly line books for your trouble, sir. um, there are a bunch of secondary characters that move on through the story that don't seem important right now, or they might be slightly important, but they move on to the next story and become bigger. I'm building a team. A critical incident response group is what the FBI calls it. Literally, the real world FBI has a thing called a critical incident response group. And that means a bunch of specialists who know how to do something. He does. He has autographed. It's going to pay off eventually. Keep hoping. Keep him alive, Einar. I love you dearly, sir. um, so the FBI will literally create a thing called a critical incident response group where they will bring in civilians that have very specific skills they need for a particular reason. So what's happening in this book series is that critical incident response group is being formed. It gets formed later in the series, but I introduce a lot of characters that are kind of minor in the first book. There's a guy named Greg who is their fabricator. He makes things. There's a lady named Latanya who is a trauma medic, and so on and so forth. They each bring something to this team as it gets assembled, and so it's a little unfortunate that there were characters that I wanted very desperately to discuss more, to bring more into the story, and I just couldn't make it work as far as story elements go and make it seem not shoehorned. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of the secondary characters I love very deeply in this book, they don't get fleshed out as much as I would like. Uh, so what did you like about this book? You said it's one that you've really enjoyed.
Um, I think for me, the whole hero aspect, and especially the hero who kind of gets pulled in, uh, not exactly against their will, but unexpectedly.
Right.
I think that's a theme that I really like, and I think that's one of the things that attracted me to it. I mean, I mentioned to you that in some ways it shares some territory with my novel Wizard Song, in that they're sort of the same thing. They get pulled in to be heroes, and it's completely unexpected.
Right.
Turns out there's a really good reason why they get pulled in, but you don't know that, and they don't even know that in the beginning. Um, and I think I like that sort of, going from. It reminds me of, I don't know if you're a fan at all of Kiss, but music from the Elders sort of has that vibe to me, where it's the sort of the story that I don't even know if they intended it. Well, I guess it was supposed to be a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the movie is someone who's an unexpected hero who is sort of chosen but doesn't realize why and becomes this hero to save everything. And I like that sort of aspect, and that has that very much.
If you give me a second, I'm going to look up a quote on this.
Okay.
There was a piece. You can chat merrily to the
We got
while I look it up.
Phil has
There
a
it is.
question here, but why don't you go ahead and do that first, and then we'll get both of them have. Oh, somebody new has a question too. Stacy Harris is here as well.
Stacy, hello, Stacy.
So, why don't you tell me what you were going to tell me, and then I will get these questions up for you.
The thing about the reluctant hero portion of this story, there's a quote that Torres has taped on the back of his name plaque at his desk.
Oh yeah.
The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, by Edmund Burke. That
Yes.
quote is a major theme through the whole series,
Yes.
because you could hide from this, you could close your eyes to it, the threats that these creatures cause, the damage that they cause. You could ignore it, but the thing is, the problem just grows unless you do something about it. And there are multiple times. One of the things I really liked when writing Torres was he's really good at giving praise to people when they do a good job. It's something that a good NCO in the military will do. Is the phrase they use in the military is praise in public and punish in private. And Torres was really good in this book about calling people out when they do a good job, and he tells them, it's not he's taking the credit all for himself. He's like, you did a spectacular job here and you deserve credit for it. And particularly Lucy, when she sees things going bad, she doesn't just shirk or, she has no reason, no real reason, it's life or death. Why risk your life to do this? But she can't not do it because
Yeah,
she's
she could literally walk away.
Yeah.
Very easily, right from the beginning, she could walk away, but she doesn't.
Repeatedly, yeah.
Yeah. Here's one of
I'm going to start beer number 2. Stacy, you still with us?
Well, here you got a question from Sil.
The book that I'm putting out right now is the first of a trilogy. There are already 2 more books written. The first book is A Girl's Gotta Eat. The second one is called Old Black Water. The third one is called Invasive Species. And I have about a quarter or a third of the fourth book in junky format, but there's a fourth book that's in the works already, and that one is Exquisite Corpse.
Okay, we got.
Yes, I if possible, I would run this series 9 books long.
Well, perhaps we could do it.
It would be great if it picked up and became a big thing, and became a TV series on HBO. And
wouldn't that be awesome?
Do you ever have the thing where you wonder, like, if they made a movie about me, who would they cast to play me?
No, I don't get that. I would never want a movie made about me.
I used to have a joke where I'd tell people, oh, if they made a movie about me, I'd have Winona Ryder play me, because it was like the least likely person I could imagine to actually ever play me. So
let's see. Here's one from Stacy.
How would I respond to this kind of emergency? There's a character in the series named Greg Tillman. He kind of manufactures things for them. He's their Q. Is that it from James Bond?
Yeah.
He's kind of their equivalent of.
Is it M?
No, M's the.
Q, M's the boss. Q's the.
Q for quartermaster.
Q's the gadget guy.
Right. So he's kind of their Q. And at one point, Greg gets asked, like, well, if all this demon fighting was going on, what were you doing? And he's like, I was at home because fighting demons is crazy in a way that I am not. And that's exactly where I would be in the midst of this sort of emergency. Is I would be what did they say in the new Spider-Man movie series? The guy in the chair.
Oh yeah, the guy in the chair.
I'd be happy to be like, go left. Yeah, go left. Hang on, I got some pretzels over here. I got a nibble. I was Air Force. In the Air Force, the enlisted people salute as the officers go off to die, not the other way around.
I'm actually a lot more of the I don't know, I guess the Lucy or Torres kind of, because it's like I can't just I just go head first. It's like I don't think about it, I just do it. I remember one time a buddy of mine and I were going into this bar, and outside the bar there was like this biker looking guy and his girlfriend or wife, and they're standing out there and in front of their pickup truck, and this dude is just hitting this girl, and I'm like, okay, I got to do this. This dude was big, and I'm like, I got to do this. I start walking over there. All of a sudden, she grabs a hold of him, spins him around, and starts hitting his head on the hood of the truck. And I'm like, okay, I'm not needed. I turn around, walk away.
They're working through things. I'll be over here.
Yeah, I'm just like, okay, I'm not needed in this instance. But that would. I always look at a situation. It's like, okay, somebody has to do something, and nobody else is going to do it. I'm just going to go. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but here we go.
Yeah, there are times when I've been put in a position where you can't let certain things happen. But if it was demons and like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think I'm going to write that one off. I love my life too much.
Well, I'm also the idiot who, in things where there's something paranormal or appears to be paranormal, I just march straight to it. I can remember one instance, which my wife says that I will um, explain away anything. And I'm explaining this one away as my imagination
Hmm.
because I can't come up with another valid explanation. But I was at this house that was supposedly haunted. And long story short, there were a bunch of things that happened, and they said that everything that was happening was in the basement, right? And so everybody went downstairs, and then I said, okay, I want everybody to go upstairs and shut off the light. I want to see what's going on down here. And I swear that as soon as the light went off, there was something in the corner, just a sphere of blackness that was blacker than everything else. And it just suddenly went from the corner to like directly in front of my face. And I just stood there and I thought, okay, well, what is this? Put my hand in it. And it felt like the most alien kind of thing I've ever felt. It didn't feel like anything. I don't know. To this day I can't explain what it felt like. There are no words for it. It was something so alien.
Did you lick it?
I did not lick it. But then I remember thinking, well, you know what? Whatever this is, there've been people living in this house forever. It's not going to hurt anyone that's here. There are two girls who have to stay the night. If I run up here terrified, they're not going to want to stay the night here. So I just calmly turned my back on it, walked up the stairs, took one for the team. Nothing happened, but I was like, okay, so that's just sort of how I am. It's like, I don't care. I'm just going to go check this out.
Gary, the supernatural horror is more afraid of you than you are of it.
That's what I figured, it ought to be. So let's see here. Let's see what else we got here. That's the science fiction end of things.
Yeah. It was a weird thing where it's like I'm writing a story about these essentially, let's call them hyperdimensional, shape-shifting, non-real. In a sense, they don't have actual anatomy. Well, how do you beat those things with guns? I mean, it seems a little. So there is some fudging of the story where it's like, no, you just have to. They have to rearrange themselves. They are static anatomy, but they have to rearrange themselves, and it takes energy to do the rearranging. So if you do enough damage to them all at once, hopefully it'll start a chain reaction and things will happen. So just don't look at that part of the plot too closely. Just
Well, anything that's got a science fiction angle, it's like there are always going to be sort of some holes in there usually, or things that don't go hold up under the microscope all that well.
there's
But you're making it up yourself, so who are they? Who's anybody to argue with it?
there are
You saw
times
it.
when I've read through my books before and I've noticed a big plot hole where it's like, oh man, I could drive a truck through this plot hole. So occasionally I'll just like hang a lampshade on it and be like, just don't worry about that. Just there's a thing where it's like, well, these two events happened really close together. You think that's just a coincidence? And one of the characters is like, yeah, that can happen. It just happens.
Chaos factor. Chaos is a real thing. Actually, Laura had one. This isn't a question, but she was answering the first question that you had. The question about how you see, or how would you respond to it? Yeah.
With snark and grace. The snark is true. I think there would be an awful lot of angry bitching. I think if you asked Einar how I would respond to mostly anything, he would agree if I said I would angrily bitch while doing whatever. I think he would agree with that. There would be cussing. There would be angry cussing. I would be threatening to stab people.
Okay, I have a question directed to me. Apparently, I don't know that I have tentacles, but I suppose I could be a Lovecraftian being. I don't know. It's possible. I could maybe not know it. I don't know. I wouldn't use any kind of chance around me just to be safe.
Okay, the question is, do you mean attached to him or in the vicinity? Like, do you have tentacles next to you on the floor? Or do you mean...
I don't see the only thing next to me on the floor is a bat lift, but
Oh, you're one of those people.
Yeah, while you dress up and do Society for Creative Anachronism stuff, I dress up as a Klingon and do charity
That's
events. So
that is nothing that would be outside the realm of weird for the folks I hang out with, sir. I have a friend who has an extensive collection of phasers and Doctor Who sonic screwdrivers.
oh, I have some of those too. Yeah,
I have friends who do cosplay of all variety. Yeah. Someday I'm going to make myself a Spider Gwen, like the costume from the Avengers. No, it's Captain America: Civil War, where they reintroduced Spider-Man, and he's got the homemade costume that's like a sweatshirt with the sleeves cut off and a pair
uh-huh.
of goggles and stuff. I want to make an equivalent Spider Gwen costume to that, where it's
Oh,
like
nice.
the homemade um, screen printed spider logo, that sort of thing, and kludgy looking web shooters.
Nice.
I want to build a cosplay for that.
One of the things I love doing cosplay stuff, and there have been a few things that I've always wanted to do, which all revolve around the same thing, which is just getting a bunch of people to cosplay a group cosplay and just show up someplace nowhere near Halloween, just act like it's perfectly normal. Um, the closest I've done to that is some of the Klingon events, but then you actually have a plan and you're there for a real reason. This would
Yeah,
just be to show up, but and I can remember I gotten into it like not into it, but I always when I'm in Klingon gear, I tend to stay pretty much in character completely. And I remember we were doing bell ringing for the Salvation Army, which for reasons I won't get into, I will not do anymore. I don't support the Salvation Army anymore. This is
same.
before I knew about them, but I had a like a teenage girl come up to me, and she's like, "Why are you dressed like that? Why are you dressed like that?" And she's like, "No, but what are you wearing it for? I wear this every day." She just would not get it. Or I walked up to Panda Express, and then when some other Klingons showed up, I very loudly pointed to Panda Express. I said, "Okay, if you're looking for something to eat, there's a place over there called Panda Express." But I asked, and I literally did. I asked them, they do not have panda. And I said, "There's another place over there called Hot Dog Hut, and I'm not sure what a hot dog is, but from looking at it, I don't think you want it."
Yeah. Have you? Did you? Were you ever a fan of the series Firefly?
I never saw it.
Okay. There's a scene where they land at a place called the Eavesdown Docks, and it's kind of a shabby, um, uh, rundown dockyard. And they get out of the ship and they're wandering around, and they walk past this place that's called Good Dogs, I think it is, and they're stir frying meat. Like
Oh,
that's
nice.
it's not hot dogs. What? It's called Good Dogs. What? Oh no. Oh. So like I would have preferred it had been hot dogs. I think it was actually dogs. So
Uh,
or that was the intent of the filmmakers was.
oh,
And I
that's
think it's a
gross.
weird social thing, like cultural, that we don't eat dogs in other places in the world they do. But I can't eat a dog. They're
No,
so
I can't either. It's funny. We had some friends who had a foreign exchange student from China at one point, and I remember he came over and saw my dog and was like, in China we eat them. And I was like, just to be sure, I wouldn't tell too many people in this country that. You
yeah.
might not get a very good response.
I have way less problems with the concept of eating horse, but apparently that really bothers some people, and I'm not sure why, because the difference between a horse and a cow is not that far in my brain. They're
Yeah,
both moved animals, and everybody has that. Like, you get to a point where if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you're like, no, if it's got feelings, I don't want to eat it. If it's got eyeballs that can look at me and a
yeah,
nervous system that feels pain, I don't want to eat it. I have a different bar for that. And I came up in southeastern Ohio where people would go out in the woods and shoot their dinner, and 16-year-old boys or 14-year-old boys would get a shotgun for Christmas and were expected to go out hunting and bring food. Everybody goes out in deer season. You go out and you bag your deer and you bring it home and you fill your freezer and you feed your family with it. And My brother was on a roadkill list, which is when a deer gets hit.
You
Um,
go pick it up in
yeah,
between.
it's a
Yeah.
it's a dead carcass, and they don't want it on the side of the road, and it's got salvageable meat. Once an animal's dead, I'm sorry, it's sad, but now it's food. And we
Well,
would go out at 3 in the morning and pull a corpse, and I was the one that did the cleaning. My brother was the one that would move the remains, and I could never go hunting. I could never end the life of an animal, but once an animal's dead, I don't
well,
really have a problem.
it seems wasteful and disrespectful to the loss of life to let it just go to waste.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
Um,
some animal somewhere is gonna eat it. It
well, yeah,
might be beetles, it might be maggots, but
that's
something's
true.
gonna eat it.
That's just the life cycle of the planet. But um, I'm like you. I'm actually very much a meat eater. But if I had to kill it, I would not be. I
Yeah,
can't do it. There's
yeah.
no way I could do that. And even some animals, like I cooked rabbit once, and it was delicious,
Mhm.
and it was really good. I put the leftovers in the fridge, and the next day all I could see was Bugs Bunny in there, and I wound up throwing it away because I couldn't eat
Oh, yeah, that's sad.
it.
I've never had to, like, wring the neck of a chicken. I mean, I've eaten like, if you took all the pieces of chicken that I've eaten in my life and put them together into a number of birds, I've probably eaten 1,000 chickens in my life. But if I had to kill one of them, I think that would be the last time I ate chicken,
I
and
had
that's
an
honest.
I had an uncle who was terrified of birds, and he was terrified of birds because he had memories of my grandmother taking chickens and wringing their necks and how they'd hop around as they were
Yeah,
dying. And he
yeah.
was terrified of birds from that.
I've seen it where they would pull the neck and chop it with an axe and let the bird run around and bleed itself out, and that is kind of traumatizing.
Okay, we're running way behind on these. I don't know how far we do I catch. I'll
Speaking
just catch a few things up here. I don't know. I might miss some, but oh, sounds like it was about with the cosplay with going into just places and
mm,
yeah. I used to think, what I was talking about with that. I was thinking, everybody dresses up as a D&D group or like some superhero group and just walk in and just hang out. Like there's nothing out of the ordinary with that, and watch people's reactions. I think that would be pretty fun.
if it's all right, I'm going to try to look up another quote from the book because
Okay.
I was just thinking about it when we were talking about meat.
And you've been told that, hey, you eat brownies.
I do eat brownies.
Uh oh.
I like brownies.
And Laura says she doesn't eat anything smarter than she is, so no pigs, dogs, or certain mushrooms. I've met some of those mushrooms before.
Some of the big where the single mushroom organism spreads across a large area.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I've heard that that's what morels are, actually. When you find a morel mushroom, there's actually a much larger thing underneath the ground, is what I had heard. I don't know if that's true, but I heard that years ago.
I'm trying very hard.
Oh, and Einar says a 2,000 leg chicken.
Yeah, chicken peed.
Yeah.
There it is.
Oh, I see. Laura said that the troop leaders get irritable when you eat brownies.
Oh, um,
That went a different direction than I thought it was going in.
so one of the themes that move through the book is that humans are made of edible meat, and because Vespid, the succubus, she's never called a succubus in the actual text of the book. I refer to her a couple times for ease of understanding to call her a succubus. Um, there's a line in here where okay. Um, they had no idea how humiliating it was, how dangerous it was, how it disintegrated one's sense of self, turning you from a human worthy of dignity into meat, not just meat, tainted meat. There's a repeated concept of how um, there's the profane and the spiritual, and how Lucy's entire life and existence is profane, only of this world. And I say that in a different place where she's sitting in a cathedral and thinking about that, how she refers to herself after seeing all this, and how the apostles say about this grand cathedral, how everyone is supposed to be humble so as to be sublime, or however she put it. And then she said, "But what do I know? I'm the Mary Magdalene of the story." So that whole concept of being reduced to nothing, but being you know a chunk of meat. And again, that goes back to the beauty concept
Right.
with Vespid and Lucy dancing, and the eyes of people upon her, the gaze of people upon her. And there's one particularly weird interaction that happens repeatedly. The character Greg, when given the choice between looking at the almost artificial perfectness of Vespid's beauty and the true prettiness, or I think I don't even describe her face as being particularly pretty, but that look, Greg, his eyes fall on Lucy instead of Vespid, because he's not looking at her as a piece of meat.
Right.
He sees something else. So,
And we had an interesting question here, which I know the answer to.
sure. So is the succubus the apex predator in this ecosystem? Vespid, the succubus in question, says specifically she's one of the weakest of her kind. Her magics are weak, her body is weak, and she's young compared to the other daemons. And then asked in a different place in the book, who created a particular artifact? Vespid says it might have been one of my people, and it might have been something else. And Lucy said, "Well, what else is there out there?" Vespid says, "How many kinds of stars and planets are there? They're countless." In a third place, and this leads into the second book, there's a line in the first book where they're driving across the Mississippi River, and Vespid says, "I don't think she likes me." And Lucy says, "Who?" And she says, "The river." That leads very specifically into the second book, Old Black Water, because the Mississippi River does not like Vespid.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Good question. Vespid is, as far as she can tell, about 200 years old, but she says time doesn't work the same between her world and our world. She thinks she's about 200 years old. And it's not as clear in the first book. It becomes more clear in the second book. Vespid doesn't look like a single specific thing. Her look changes over time. She reacts to the gaze that people give her. She adjusts the way she looks, the way she sounds, the way she moves, and gets feedback on how people respond to it.
Isn't that actually sort of in a way what people do anyway? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you know, everybody's different. It presents a different side of themselves depending on who they're around.
There was a picture that I saw once that was like they took all these pictures of women from around the world, and they made a single amalgam photo that was, it didn't have a distinguishable race, or however you want to say it, ethnicity. It was because it was merged, the space between the eyes, the size of the nose, every proportion, and it turned out to be sort of the most average looking face in the world, which
Hmm.
everyone in general found the most pleasing. And that was the face that I tried to describe Vespid having. She doesn't look like a particular race. Through the book, people keep saying, "Well, I don't know, she's maybe more North African or Islander or Indian," and nobody can place her because she doesn't look like any particular thing. She does have sort of light brown skin and black hair, and that's about as much as you can say, which describes like what, 80% of the world population.
Something like that. Yeah. Didn't somebody think she was Egyptian? I
North
think.
African, yeah, is what they
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
How long has Vespid been in our world? A few years. There was. It comes out in the book. Why are you asking me all these questions?
Read the book.
If you
Yeah.
mean, did she consciously change her look? She does not. She's not even aware why she looks the way she looks.
Although there's some instances in the first book where she does consciously change
Yeah, she can
completely.
consciously change to look like a specific person if
Right.
she has consumed them, essentially.
Right.
I'm giving away plot.
Yeah. I think from there it's like that. You're probably giving away a lot of the book.
Yeah. Read
Read the book ASAP.
the book. Did you
Yeah.
ever see the series called The Critic? It was an animated series with John Lovitz.
I remember seeing some commercials for it, but I don't think I ever saw it.
There's a scene where he writes a book and he's got a little cardboard cutout of himself that's like a side view, and it's going, "Read my book, read my book." So
That's funny. No, I highly recommend reading the book because I love that book.
I am so happy with it, and honestly, the thing that's killing me is I'm waiting for you to read the second book.
Oh, I know. I'm waiting for us to get working on that. Like I said, I've got some other things I have to get
Yeah, and
to
we've got
take
like
care of
what is
first.
it, a
But
year and 15 months? Is that what it is for
what
the second book?
the second? What's that?
Is it 15 or 9 months? What's the
9 months. We're
9 months?
9 months apart, which I
Okay.
kind of like that.
Yeah, that's a good time frame. So
Yeah.
get this one a chance to get a little bit of traction and some interest in the series, and hopefully it will get going and get me a huge fan base, and I'll go to conventions and people will throw flowers at me and tear off their tops and scream my name. And
Yeah, I know. I know. We couldn't do pre-orders.
this was this was literally the first day this morning. What was it?
I
5
know.
a.m. You sent me a link. It's live.
Yeah, it was something a little sometime I don't know 5:30 maybe it was took me to get it, and it was weird because I've never done one that was had the mature rating on it. So when I went into the Lulu page, I couldn't see it, and so then when I logged in and then I just searched for it on Lulu's bookstore and I found it, but then I had to verify my age before it would show it to me. Which I could have. I mean, I could have been 12 and put that in
Wow.
because they didn't actually. I didn't have to log in. I just had to verify my age.
I remember they had the Stephen King novels in my middle school. Like, that shit's excruciatingly rated R.
Oh yeah, I mean some of them, and I haven't read. I mean, I haven't read all of them by any means, but I've heard that some of them. I've heard that it gets really cringy in places.
Yeah.
I have not read it. I tried to read it. I remember that was the one. That was the book that I gave up on Stephen King because I remember, it's like you fight for time to read, and it's like sometimes you only have a little bit of time to read a day, and so I sit down and I'm reading this book, and I remember I get maybe 12, 13 chapters in, and all of a sudden they mention this character, and it's been, a few weeks since I read the first chapter, and I'm like, who the hell is this? I have to go back in the back of the book, the beginning of the book, to figure out who it is because I've forgotten who that character was. And I suddenly said, this is not entertaining. This is like work. I don't want to do this. And I set it aside.
Have you ever done the thing where you write two characters and their names are just a little bit too similar, and then you have to go back and change the name of a character?
No, I don't think I've done that. One of the things I do a lot, I don't do it always, but I do this a lot, is I start off with just some names I throw in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like placeholder names.
Right. And then after I've gotten it sort of done, I will go in and I don't know if anybody knows this about my stuff, and it's not everything I've done, but a lot of times I go and look up names that mean certain things, and I give characters names that fit who they are. I've got a vampire character who the last name he's like hundreds and hundreds of years old, and he's gone through all kinds of names, but he's using the last name Fleischer, which if you look it up actually means like butcher. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a very appropriate last name, but you've got to look it up to realize that that's and a lot of the names in these in my stories, that's what I do. I'll go through and find names that are reflect what they are in the story.
Right. I
Um,
I had a weird serendipity thing. I named Javier Torres, and then in the second book, I have someone say something about his name, like they make a very pointed um, observation about his both his first and his last name, and it matches with the story. Only when I named the character, I had no intent for it to be that. It was just it had a good sound to me.
oh wow!
And yeah, and it's like this name sounds good. Javier Torres has a good sound to it. And then it comes around to the second book, and there's somebody doing a tarot reading for him, and they throw down a card, and then they start explaining, and they're like, "What's your name again?" That's weird that it means that it connects to this, and it was so weirdly serendipitous. I did intentionally pick Lucy's name, her actual non-stage name, Madison Carpenter. Madison is on the top 10 list of names of commonality for the year she's supposedly born. And I picked Carpenter for several reasons and went back and forth whether or not to change it to something else, and then decided to keep it Carpenter. And then Lucy was I literally picked from the song. And
Which,
then funny, go ahead.
which, by the way, I want to say that's a great album.
Yes,
That
yes.
was that was the comeback album for Deep Purple, where they suddenly had the Deep Purple sound again, and that's an amazing album.
The
That
the
album is so Deep Purple.
The other thing that I thought was really weird was in the story itself, Lucy says she picked her stage name, Lucy, from a completely different song than the one I referenced. There's a song called She's Crafty by the Beastie Boys. And I think her name was Lucy, but we all call her Luce. And that was where she picked her stage name from in the story. But in reality, it had come from Knocking at Your Back Door by Deep Purple. So I thought that was a little bit amusing.
That's nice.
Then I went looking for songs that had Lucy in the lyrics or in the titles. There's a lot of them. That's a name that gets used a lot in music.
Interesting. Here's
Any plans for an audiobook? I have read aloud this book to multiple people, and if I knew how to use software well to record it, I would. If I knew somebody whose rate was good for audio recording, I would absolutely do it. And when it came to a point in time when right now the book is going to be hard copy, when it gets released as either digital, I would also release it as audiobook if I could.
well,
Because
I can talk to you about some good software for recording audio if you wanted to do it yourself.
absolutely, because one of the things is the accents, the intonations, all that thing I could explain to a voice actor, but I could do it much faster myself. Even I'm not sure how great my voice sounds recorded though. You know that thing, everyone hates their own
Oh
voice when
yeah,
it's
yeah,
recorded?
yeah, absolutely. We got. Let's see here. Um, do you know what that's about?
I don't.
I don't either.
Anything else?
Is that a reference to G?
Savior Towers. His
Yeah.
name, Torres, does mean tower. Javier means castle.
Castle Tower.
Yeah. I have not. I ought to. I ought
That
to
would be a
get
cool idea.
particularly it's way more obvious in the second book because in the first book Torres rides around listening to what he calls real rock radio, which you don't know probably being not native to St. Louis, but that's a specific reference because it's the catchphrase for KC 95 in St. Louis.
Oh,
KC
interesting.
95 real rock radio. um, and Torres rides around in his SUV listening to real rock radio all day, and there's a reference actually to the "You Have a Friend in the Jewelry Industry" commercials they always run on KC 95. Um, but he listens to classic rock in the second and third book. Second book particularly, there's a bunch of references to very specific songs. I realized when I wrote the second book that you can by title reference a song, but you can't quote the lyrics.
I think I think you can actually do it if you do like a line or two. I think you can get by with. I think I've heard that.
I didn't want to even tap dance around
Yeah,
it.
I think there's something called fair use, and I think something like that with fair use. I think you can get by with a line or two. You definitely can get by with a title, no question about that.
I do reference a couple songs or pieces of music by title in the first book, but most of them are classical. Um, I have a couple that I mention that if you know the group in question by the description, you would know who I'm talking about or that sort of thing. There's a thing where they talk about a Faroese metal band, and as far as I know, there's only one metal band from the Faroe Islands. It's called Tyr. Um, so yeah, there's some reference to music. I gotta make a song list.
I've got. It's interesting. One of my vampire stories. The whole point of the story is about how somebody gets converted into a vampire, both from a psychological point of view and physically turned into one.
Hmm.
And one of the early scenes in it's a rock band that she's touring with, and she gets on the tour bus, and I mentioned Van Halen's Fair Warning album playing, and the first song plays. Well, the first song has a line in there that says from turn from hunted into hunter, which is exactly what happens with her.
Hmm.
It kind of that was intentional that I put that there, but I don't know if anybody will ever get it.
Oh, I'm sure they'll pick it up. Someone, no matter how obscure you make a reference, someone will get it, and no matter how blatant you make a reference, somebody will miss it.
Oh yeah. So Laura agrees that that's fair use. I'm pretty sure that does qualify. A couple lines I think is fair use. Certainly, if you're going to put the entire song in there, that's a completely different thing. I saw I saw a somebody's looking for submissions for short stories based on Alice Cooper songs,
Yeah, I saw that too.
and they specifically said don't use the lyrics because you're going to get into copyright trouble. But I'm like I said, I'm almost positive that a couple lines you would get by with. But if that's the rules,
Yeah,
you stick with their rules. But kind of a cool. I thought about writing something for it because I'm a huge Alice Cooper fan, but I
yeah.
ultimately decided I've got other stuff I have to do. So
I think the most I know about Alice Cooper is he was in Prince of Darkness.
what that for a long time that was my favorite horror movie.
I love that whole era. For some reason, the flavor, the lighting, the practical effects, that era of horror is sort of my favorite.
Yeah, and I like one of the things I like about John Carpenter is how things start very normally, and it's I always describe it as a snowball going down a hill and just peaking up and getting bigger and bigger, and toward the end you're like, whoa, how on earth did we get to here from there,
Yeah.
and I like that, you wind up so deep in it, and that movie just really works for me on that level.
That sort of creep factor in his movies and the body horror of Cronenberg.
Yeah,
Those things, all of that had, the way that I write my horror, I think is strongly influenced by all that. Um, and I think you had said something about this would make a good movie. When I write, I almost think of it as like I'm watching a movie play out. So
that's how I write too, so yeah.
I imagine this as a movie, and I reference songs because it's kind of the soundtrack in my head that's playing on this scene of the movie.
Right.
There's a scene where in the book where Lucy is driving into a particularly ritzy neighborhood, and she's hearing this piece of Bach that they use in luxury car commercials all the time,
Oh wow.
and it's like you all know the song. Look it up. When you hear it, you'll go like, "Oh yeah, that's that
Yeah,
bullshit
yeah.
luxury car commercial song." No, that's a piece of Bach. I mean, it's classical music, but they use it all the time because it's like, well, obviously, if you have the fine taste to listen to the Bach, you want our car. Your car's fucking bullshit. You know how much it costs to repair your piece of garbage? Not that I have an opinion.
No, of course not.
I have not cast any of the characters in my head. Einar, who is watching at this moment, told me that George Lopez ought to be playing Javier Torres. and
Seems
we
too
watched.
old.
Yeah, he is now, but we were watching
Mhm.
Balls of Fury.
I
Have you
haven't
seen
seen
Balls
that.
of Fury?
No.
It is a gloriously stupid movie. But it has George Lopez, and he has. I talk about the salt and pepper spiky hair, not being able to keep control of the spikes in the front, and he has that beautiful spiky thick black hair with salt and pepper in it. And you know, George Lopez, he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
Torres, I'm not sure if Torres is a funny guy or if he thinks he's a funny guy. I think it's really going to be the reader's interpretation. He's trying really hard to be funny. I don't know if he's succeeding. Torres has a sense of humor that is it's not quite gallows humor.
Right.
Yeah, George Lopez
I
playing
thought
an FBI agent in Balls of Fury.
we should probably wrap this just because
Yeah, it's coming.
StreamYard has a limit on how long these can be, and I'm not really sure what that limit is. I haven't looked it up in a while. We're closing in on 2 hours here.
Yeah, we've been at it a while.
So
Luckily, that's what beer does for me.
we probably should wrap this up.
This
Let's
has been fantastic, sir.
This has been awesome, and it's always, it's funny because you and I got to know each other strictly on Facebook and collaborating on stuff over time, and so I mean I consider you a good friend, and
Thank
um,
you.
so it's always good to get to chat with you too.
It's wonderful to meet somebody, create a working relationship, and then realize you really like hanging out and chatting with them about stuff that's not work related. And
Exactly.
I've had a
As you
wonderful
and I,
time.
as you and I have discussed, we have a lot in common. A lot of the same likes and things and interests, and so it's always good. It's fun.
Yeah, and it's been wonderful, and I really appreciate this because I am too much of a coward to set up this stuff myself and just have my own web page or whatever, podcast, any of that stuff. Um, so it's nice to have someone draw me out of my shell and force me to be sociable and record myself and look at my face and listen to my voice. So thank you for doing this for me, and thank you for pushing through with the willpower when I was feeling ground to a halt. And I've been at this for 5 years. I wrote this in 2017, and to see it physically happen and to hold it in my hands and to have it available to the public, uh, it means more to me than I can really express. So thank you so much. And I hope for absolutely the best for both of us and for Tales of Wonder and Dread become an explosively huge company that makes you so much money it's disgusting.
Oh, now that I would absolutely love. Let's see that happen. But let me just tell you, thank you for letting me publish the book because I really like it so much. I mean, I'm glad to be part of this trip with you. This is very cool.
I appreciate it. And
Um,
hopefully it will sell well, and hopefully this video will get people interested. And all of you out there who happen to watch it or are watching it currently, point your friends to it, recommend it, write reviews on Lulu, cram it down people's throats.
yes, please, 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 please do reviews. That's one of the as an author, that's one of the hardest things is you send out things, and a lot
Yeah,
of times people even say, "Yeah, I'm going to review it. I love the book. I'm going to review it," and
nothing.
nothing.
Yep,
And I get it. It takes an effort to go in there and do it.
yep,
I get that, but it's very disappointing because reviews actually help books sell and help get the word out, and especially good reviews. Bad reviews, not so much. Um, and if you want to buy the book, you can get it. Now you can get it lulu.com/spotlight/strange sound. Um, which originally when my first book came out was Strange Sound of Cthulhu, and that was the only book I thought it was going to be, so that's the name I wound up with. And but now, like I said, you might have to verify age to see it listed
yep.
there. I'm not sure how that works because I couldn't see it at first this morning. So otherwise, if you go to GaryHillAuthor.com, there's a Tales of Wonder and Dread page. There are actually 2 pages of books there now, and it's on the first page. So you can find the links. Yes, Tales of Wonder and Dread. And you can find the links. You'll find a link to the Goodreads listing. You'll find a link to the paperback copy and a link to the hardcover. So, and those take you directly to Lulu where you buy them.
One last bit. Not only do I have my novel coming out, but we have these collections.
Yes, and those are fun collections too.
These have stories from classic authors, H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think it's like I'm so far beyond those. I did those so long ago that I don't even remember what's in them.
But I have a short story in both of these collections. One is called The Revenant, and one is called Abatement. Abatement is in the Spooky Houses,
yep.
and Revenant is in Spooky Stories.
And those are both, if you go to that Tales of Wonder and Dread page on thegaryhillauthor.com, you'll find those on the second page of books, which very soon that's going to be 3 pages of books. But so anyway, thank you. And thanks, folks, for coming in and chatting. I'm sorry, we got some questions left behind, but we really need to wrap this up.
Give me a couple. I'll see if I can answer them real quick. Tommy
Okay.
Lee Jones is Torres. He's number one, way too old nowadays. Sorry.
Yeah, he is.
Is it gender essential to the character? What about Halle Berry? Halle Berry might make a good Vespid.
Oh, I could see that. Yeah.
Fine. Should. Or Sigourney Weaver as Torres. I don't know if Torres' gender is as important to his character as Lucy's gender is to her character. So, impossible. Probably won't be carried at Left Bank Books, but I will be looking into it. Left Bank's Books, by the way, is a LGBT-friendly bookstore in the St. Louis area.
Okay.
Shameless Grounds, I will be talking with them tomorrow, literally.
Okay, great.
Shameless Grounds is a body-positive coffee shop in St. Louis.
Oh, nice.
Who is friendly to the LGBT and kink communities.
Oh, cool. Well, that's it for this then. And again, thanks for being here, and thanks everybody for the questions and for chatting. And congratulations again. We got this out. Great working with you on it too.
Thank you. I'm so tickled. I can't even describe it. I'm so nervous. I'm sweating. Oh my god.
All right. Well, that's it for this. And
thanks everybody. Came in under 2 hours.
Yeah, we're doing just under 2 hours. That was awesome.
All right.
Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.